Hey everyone, it's Emily with Spiceworks. Thanks for tuning in today and joining us on another Spiceworks Partner webinar, Closing Security Gaps in Office 365, Dropbox, and Other Cloud Services, brought to you by Pulse Secure. Before we get started, I do want to remind everyone this webinar is being recorded. If you have to step away for any reason, you will get an email with a link to the video in about a week. Also, there's a Q&A box on your screen to the left. I encourage you to submit your questions at any time during the presentation, and we'll get to those questions at the end via everyone Q&A. But if your question isn't addressed live, someone will be able to follow up with you. Today, we also have a live chat, so click on that widget at the bottom of your screen to join us in that. Now, I'd like to introduce our presenter, Kevin Sapp, VP of Strategy. So, Kevin, whenever you're ready, take it away.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. This is Kevin Sapp. I'm part of the strategy group here at Pulse Secure. My focus, generally speaking, is around cloud security, but also related to mobile security, authentication, and other types of matters. I'm really focused on where Pulse Secure is headed next in terms of new technologies and new customer environments. With that, I'll get right into the slides. I think we scheduled about 30 to 35 minutes of discussion around the slides. I'll try to get through it in that time, and then we'll leave time at the end for Q&A. So I think you have the ability to kind of stack up your questions or think about what you would like me to address as I go through this, and I'll try to get to as many questions as I can at the end of the presentation. So over the last, I would say, year and a half, Pulse Secure has been very focused on where the customer is moving in terms of their new IT environments. In the past, we've been focused primarily on connecting PCs to the data center. We've noticed that customers, of course, are increasingly adopting mobile devices and mobile applications. So that's something we would refer to as mobile to the data center. Kind of along with that has been the rise of mobile apps connecting directly to cloud apps. So mobile and cloud are very interesting to me because they've sort of grown up together, I would say. Most of the mobile apps that your employees use, whether you're aware of them or not, are directly connecting to cloud services and may or may not traverse your data center, depending on where the employee is. For example, if they're remote, they're probably just directly connecting to Salesforce or other types of applications from mobile apps on their phone. If they're at the office, they may be doing that over your Wi-Fi networks or other types of networks in your organization. But essentially, those apps connect directly to the cloud. As those apps move into the enterprise data center, we're really seeing now a very complicated environment, which I'm going to get to in the next several slides. Really what we're seeing is this kind of BYOX phenomenon, and you've probably heard lots of buzzwords and terms around this, including BYOD, which is related to bring your own device, or BYOA, which is bring your own app, etc. But you're having all these sort of BYO technologies, if you will, connecting into a hybrid IT environment. So some examples. So a user may be using their mobile phone, a BYOD, bring your own device mobile phone, to connect to your intranet or to SharePoint directly inside the data center from the office. Or they could be using an application that they've essentially brought in. You find this often in marketing departments where they've adopted applications like Dropbox or Slack or what have you that may or may not be under the control of IT. But what you essentially have within your organization, whether or not that's visible to you, is a hybrid IT infrastructure. And we'll talk about what that means going forward. So the old world for Pulse Secure and for our customers was really around providing remote access to the data center. And when we used to talk about mobility, it didn't necessarily have anything to do with smartphones. What it really had to do was people using their laptops, generally Windows-based laptops, to connect from their home offices into the corporate data center. Again, generally accessing corporate applications like SAP or .NET-based applications or SharePoint, all of those sort of traditional IT applications. That's been our focus. So Pulse Secure is the leader in remote access VPN capabilities. We've been that for a very long time. And that's been really our focus, and that's been how our customers have viewed us and the primary challenge that our customers have dealt with. Over the last couple of years, however, a lot has changed. Many of our customers are dealing with BYOD types of devices, wanting to connect into the data center. They're dealing with onboarding cloud services. So, for example, you may be using Azure or Amazon Web Services, for example, to host applications that you previously hosted within your own data center. And then, of course, there's Saas, which SaaS applications like Salesforce or Office 365, which are operated by your SaaS vendor, and your level of control there is fairly minimal. Now, whether you're talking about remote access or secure access in the new world, a lot of capabilities have grown up around connecting people to the applications and the data they need to do their jobs effectively. Those include visibility. So, for example, IT needs the ability to understand who's connecting to what. Compliance. Compliance is a very big topic here at Pulse Secure, and it's one I spend a lot of time thinking about. This really has to do with ensuring that only properly secured and managed devices connect into your applications or into your infrastructure. So when I refer to compliance, that's generally what I mean. Authentication, of course, is always a big topic. Again, I've spent probably the last 10 years of my career focused in this area of authentication. Again, you want to make sure that when a user tries to connect to something, you know it's really that user. And there are a variety of methods to do that, anything from simple passwords all the way to very strong authentication mechanisms, multi-factor authentication, certificates, hard tokens, you name it. Those are capabilities that have grown up around this ecosystem. And then finally, there's access control. And that's kind of being more granular around who and from what device should have access to what service. So something in your infrastructure needs to make that determination. Humans, of course, write the policies for that to say who should have access to what, but generally you have some sort of automated control in place to enforce that access control. So when we talk about BYOD types of devices, and by the way, it doesn't necessarily have to only be BYOD. It can be BYOD devices. It can be corporate-issued mobile devices. It could be corporate-issued laptops connecting into these services. When we're talking about the infrastructure now, we really mean data center, cloud, and SaaS. So if you're trying to govern access to all of those types of things from all of the various endpoints, we need to move away from the notion of remote access, as we've traditionally thought about it, into a model around secure access. So what are enterprise IT customers doing today? What's sort of going on in terms of the nuts and bolts of how they're trying to protect these types of services? So they're dealing with lots of different OSs. So I already talked about BYOD to some extent, but there's the actual underlying OS and the various security models provided by those OSs. Certainly there's still Windows laptops and desktops. Those are still dominant within the enterprise, and I expect they will be for quite a while. But other OSs are coming in, including Mac OS X, Linux devices, end-user devices, depending on your organization. Certainly mobile devices like iOS, and also to some extent Android coming into the enterprise. You have now mobile applications that you're trying to support for your end users. You may have initiatives where you're trying to move applications that were previously hosted in your own data centers to cloud-based infrastructure as a service like Azure or AWS or what have you. You're rolling out cloud or SaaS apps, or if you're not, you're probably being asked to, or you're at least considering this. And by the way, I think we find that many organizations live somewhere on a spectrum. And the spectrum on one end is no SaaS, no cloud types of applications, no mobile applications in our organization. Very buttoned down traditional IT. On the other extreme, of course, and this is very common in smaller organizations, they may be almost entirely cloud-based. All of their infrastructure and applications may be entirely cloud-based, and they run very little on-prem. I think, at least with our customer base, we're finding that enterprises are somewhere in the middle. They may skew one way or the other, but they generally tend to be somewhere in the middle. And then, of course, there's the data center itself. So the enterprise applications you've run for a long time, these could be applications like built on SAP or Oracle. They could be .NET web applications that you guys have built yourselves. There's VDI services. There are terminal services. There are all sort of the traditional applications that have been run out of the data center. So how are organizations securing this? Well, we're seeing lots of silos being put into place and lots of different boxes, if you will, being installed in customers' data centers. These could be capabilities like NAC, which are network access control. There are a variety of vendors in that space. PulseSecure is one of the leaders in that space. There is mobile device management is coming online, so you may choose a different vendor for mobile device management to actually manage those devices, iOS devices. There are some big names around that. Mobile application management, which may be part of your MDM solution or maybe something else, which really has to do with how do we distribute applications to our end users or to our partners. There are VDI gateways. There are VPN gateways. Certainly PulseSecure knows a lot about the VPN gateway business. In some cases, you may be standing up a separate mobile gateway. Then there are enterprise web gateways to control outbound access from people working in the office. And one of the very newest types of capabilities coming online is the cloud security gateway. There are lots of implementations of that type of technology. There are completely hosted versions of it. There are versions which themselves tend to be hybrid, where you may have an appliance on-prem and some sort of SaaS-based management. There are whole kind of industry categories emerging like CASB, which could potentially fall into this category. But basically what's happening is that the security apparatus is growing up in organizations in a very kind of organic and messy way. So you end up with lots of boxes in your data center that are all trying to solve fairly similar problems, but may have a different application that they're trying to secure, and that's now created a very complicated environment. So what does all this boil down to? Now you have challenges around mobility. Mobility is now a reality for many organizations, and mobility far beyond the laptop or the notebook and out into all sorts of mobile devices. Data center consolidation is one that we're hearing a lot about from our customer base. They're starting to take a look at their data center, and they're saying, look, we've put in place all of this technology to address all of these different, to secure all of these different applications, but we really have no sort of centralized management of those appliances. We have too many appliances. We have too many vendors that we're dealing with. So many organizations are now thinking about how do we consolidate our data center and get our security footprint kind of more homogeneous and more under control. And then finally, there's this notion of hybrid IT, which is that, we had our data center before. We understood that environment pretty well. It was guarded by our firewalls and other security apparatus. Now we have all of these cloud and SaaS services coming into play, so we've now grown into this truly hybrid IT environment. How do we get our arms around that? Now I want to step through some of the challenges. First, I'll talk through some of the challenges your end users may be facing, and then I'll address challenges that tend to be more IT-centric, meaning the people responsible for IT security and IT operations. So generally, users at any given time will fall into one of these three buckets. Increasingly, users are on the go. Now, this has always been the case, right? You've always had employees who travel. These could be salespeople, execs, field service engineers, what have you, even folks within the IT department who need to travel to different sites. You, of course, have people who are in the office. This may be even the majority of your employee population. And then you have people who generally will work out of a home office. So they tend to be stationary, but they're remote for whatever reason, but they need access to all of the data center resources that IT is providing. So when you're on the go and you're now using a mobile device and mobile applications and trying to access data center services, you run into some very interesting problems. One is that on their phone, often people don't know what their password is for a given application. They really don't know how to log into the thing. So, Apple and Google, for example, have made it very easy for you to go and download applications on your phone that should be able to access a service, but how do I actually get into it if it's secured? So that there's still sort of a chicken and the egg bootstrapping problem that end users have to deal with. Another question is, why do I have to sign into each and every mobile app, particularly for users who are used to having some sort of a single sign-on capability provided by their IT organization? You simply don't have that on a mobile device, or if you do, the solutions tend to be kludgy. And a user may have 10 mobile applications on their phone that they use on a regular basis, even if it's 5, for example. When a user gets onboarded and those 5 applications are pushed to their device, they need to sign into each one of those individually with a separate account, a separate password, and that tends to be very painful. So basically, the net of that is that single sign-on for mobile is certainly not as mature as it is for kind of the enterprise in the office experience. Then if you have other security controls in place, maybe you're using some sort of token, like an RSA token, for example, that might be part of your policy to access services, or you require a certificate installed on someone's laptop to access services or what have you. When you're talking about mobile apps, those security tokens may not work well, or they may not provide a very good experience for the end user. So they're saying, okay, to access the service, I need a security token, but my security token doesn't work with the app the way that I like to use it on my device. So all of these things are really usability challenges for employees who travel a lot and really depend on their mobile device. I actually fall into this bucket. I travel a lot for work, and I use my mobile device heavily for lots of things, do a lot of work on that versus, say, my laptop, which I also have, and I deal with these challenges as well. Then you have the people that are in the office. So you're in the office, but keeping up with all of the applications that are rolling out and being able to sign into all of those applications, for example, in a secure way becomes challenging. So, for example, are you using a single sign-on solution, as I mentioned in the previous slide? Are you providing a portal for your end users to be able to access these types of services? Is it convenient and easy for them to get to services that are sanctioned and managed by corporate IT, or are users just working around that? I gave the marketing department example before, not to pick on marketers, but I see this a lot with them, where they will roll out applications themselves. They basically just will adopt these ad hoc, because getting to the applications that have been provided by the IT department is just too hard, or they don't know where to go to get to all of those applications. And then finally, there's the workers at home, and this actually brings up some very interesting cases. One is, to get to some applications that might be hosted in the data center, they might need VPN access. So they've been taught to start up the, go click on the VPN icon, sign in, start up the VPN, and then start whatever application it is you're using. I mentioned VDI before. That's kind of a good example where you would need VPN access. In another case, if they need to get to Salesforce, well, generally speaking, you don't use a VPN for that. So to get to that application is a completely different experience. So I think it's often confusing for people to understand whether or not they need to use a VPN and exactly how they're supposed to access one application versus another. Another one that's kind of interesting is that, remote employees who are sort of good citizens from a security perspective do tend to consider security issues. Maybe they've had some training around this or what have you. But for example, let's say you have a remote employee who has both their corporate issued device, computer, and they may have a family computer, et cetera. So, or you may have an employee who typically works in the office but occasionally works from home and would like to use their family computer or their home laptop to access the service. They're really struggling with these questions of, is it okay to download this file to my home computer? Is that in line with my corporate security policy? If I can't do that, why is it that I can't do that? So I think just not really having a clear guidance on policies around what they should do from non-corporate issued computers is an issue. And then, of course, you have the issue of, okay, now I need access to a service. Maybe I need to get to something on SharePoint. I'm at home. I don't have access to my kind of portal that's exposed on the Internet. How do I get to it? What was the URL to access that? Or maybe another employee who does work in the office has shared something with that remote employee, shared a file, for example. How is the remote employee supposed to have access to that thing without having to remember URLs and all of the rest of it? How can we just make it easy for that user? So now I want to talk about some of the challenges that enterprise IT is facing. This is one that I hear about, these themes I hear about a lot in talking to lots of different customers. Different customers focus on different types of challenges. Today, I'm really going to focus fairly squarely on cloud access challenges, really cloud initiatives, and mobility initiatives that are going on in the organization that are challenging various departments within IT, particularly security. So I think there's a lot of security concerns about rolling out new applications and new services, particularly if those apps and services don't run in the traditional data center and don't work the way that I've done things in the past. So how do we deal with those? So I'm going to just sort of step through these, and I do want to spend some time on this slide, and it would be good for each of you to kind of think about your own organization and think about if you're running into these specific scenarios or these are coming up in your organization and it's something you have to deal with, or feel free to extrapolate a little bit. Maybe it's not Office 365 you're dealing with, but maybe it's Google Apps or what have you. But are there cases where you're running into these mobile and cloud initiatives that are going on and you really don't know how to get your arms around it from a security perspective? So let's talk about the first initiative. One is we're seeing that lots of organizations are starting to build mobile apps to access core on-prem business systems. Now this one's very interesting to me because like I said in some previous slides that today when I use a mobile application, it generally will know how to talk to some cloud service. And outside of the login issues that I mentioned before, that works pretty seamless for the end user. The mobile app connects directly to the cloud service over the Internet, so connectivity really isn't an issue there. Now, what organizations are trying to do is they're saying, okay, I have an on-prem system like SAP or Oracle or what have you that's been built up, and now I want to mobilize those. And often people refer to this as a digital strategy. So they want to mobilize, they want to build a mobile application, whether that's a native mobile application or a hybrid application. And that application should access a resource that's traditionally only been accessed through the data center. How do I provide an experience that works like a native mobile app connecting to a Saas service? One of the first things you run into right away is connectivity. So yes, we have a plan to go build an app. Yes, we have a plan for making services available to mobile users. But how will I actually connect those applications for a mobile device that could be anywhere in the world into my data center in a secure manner? That's a huge issue, and it's often one of the roadblocks to being able to roll out kind of a mobile application initiative. The next is, and this is a big one that we're hearing about quite a bit, is that we're migrating from on-prem Exchange to Office 365. So traditionally, of course, large enterprise especially has, ran their email on Exchange, email, calendar, contacts, all of the rest of it. And they've managed their Exchange servers. There's been pretty good guidance from Microsoft and others in terms of how you secure an Exchange environment that you manage within your data center. You may have Exchange specialists, and you may even have security specialists whose focus is around Exchange. But now there's a big push in the industry. Lots of organizations are trying to migrate away from on-prem Exchange to Office 365. Microsoft is pushing this themselves very heavily. And one of the primary concerns that comes up with customers is that they're going to lose the ability to control access to email. And let me give you an example. Often when people buy a mobile device management solution today, one of the key requirements around that is to say that I want to make sure that only mobile devices that are managed by my MDM can access my Exchange server. That's a very common requirement, and anyone that's done a mobile device management implementation is probably very familiar with this. And it's kind of a core feature of MDM as well, and it's very important. Okay, but now if you're going to move to Office 365, how are you going to deal with that same type of challenge? The solutions that grew up to solve that before were really about building proxy servers and deploying proxy servers in front of your Exchange server. Some of you might have heard of Exchange Active Sync proxies and other types of capabilities. When you're talking about connecting from a mobile device directly to the cloud, all of that notion of proxy servers and all of the technology that grew up before to gate access to email has now gone away. So how do you address this type of challenge? The same can be said for Google Apps. So for example, if you're a Google App shop or you're thinking about migrating away from your on-prem email system to something like Google, well, you should have the very same question in mind, right? How will I actually gate access? How will I make sure that only secured devices that I know are good by however you define good, actually access to that email service? Sometimes they won't even connect over Exchange Active Sync. They'll use a different protocol. The way that the mobile apps actually authenticate to those services is very different. They may be authorized with an OAuth token. So there's all these new sort of security protocols and communications protocols that you now have to deal with as well. So now this becomes a very complicated problem, just from a security perspective. Another scenario that we're seeing a lot is that people are migrating away from on-prem file storage or file shares, the classic, Z drive or whatever it is you may have in your organization, up to a cloud-based solution. Now these include things like Box, Dropbox, which we talked about a little bit, Google Drive, OneDrive from Microsoft. There's lots of very good options on the market today. And several of those have a very strong enterprise focus, so lots of sort of security built in with respect to data at rest in those cloud services. So there's a lot of reasons to sort of move to those. For one, it makes sharing files much easier, and it makes collaboration within the organization much easier. But one of the core issues is that now security is worried about my users can download sensitive files to any device, to any unsecured device. What prevents a user accessing Box or Dropbox or Google Drive or OneDrive from an internet cafe in another country, as an example? So there's lots of issues around that. One of the common ones that I hear about a lot is really actually a fairly simple one, is that they want to make sure that users only access such a service, one of these file storage services, from corporate issued laptops. Now that's a very common case, and some of you might even want to think about that, because I bet some of you are actually have the same requirement in your own organization. So there needs to be a way to identify a particular machine, my laptop, for example, as being issued to me by PulseSecure, my company. How does your cloud service actually make that determination? Does your cloud service even support that notion? So that's another big issue. And then finally, there's just the volume around SaaS apps that organizations are rolling out. So you have SaaS apps from a variety of vendors. Often you choose SaaS applications from sort of a best-in-breed model. This is what we see right now a lot. So for example, with the applications and infrastructure that you probably have in place in your data center today, you may have a preferred vendor. Maybe you're a Microsoft shop, or maybe you're an IBM shop, or what have you. So you tend to buy lots of software from that preferred vendor. In the SaaS world, I would say it's much earlier, and what we really see is more best-of-breed vendors out there. So you'll choose Salesforce for CRM. You may choose Workday for HR. You may choose Concur for expenses, as an example. And the list goes on. And usually once you start to roll out SaaS applications, there tends to be a push to roll out more of these. Okay, how can we move more of our infrastructure to the cloud or to these SaaS services? And as you're thinking about rolling out these different SaaS services from a variety of vendors, now you run smack into this problem of how do I actually secure all of those SaaS apps in a uniform way? Each of the applications that I mentioned, those are pretty well-known enterprise SaaS applications, and they'll provide some level of security and visibility directly within the service itself. So, Salesforce, for example, will have a way to set policy and determine who has access to which accounts and resources within Salesforce. Workday will have its own scheme. Concur will have its own scheme. The issue is that, okay, who in your organization should be responsible for setting up those policies? How can I make sure that those policies all tie back to a central data access policy? In other words, you've written security policies within your organization about who should have access to what, and you've trained your employees on it, but how do you actually manifest that in each of the services that you're rolling out? That's actually a very hard problem, and it doesn't scale very well. Your security people who would typically be writing these types of policies, say in infrastructure, like your VPN or your firewall, for example, are they supposed to go in and learn all of these different applications and then configure those policies in these systems? So that to me doesn't seem very scaled at all, and that's why I hear about this a lot as well from customers. So these are just some of the challenges that we're finding that a good number of customers who are really moving in the cloud direction are really struggling with. So now I'll talk a little bit about Pulse Secure, just so you know where we came from. For those of you who don't know us, although I would imagine many of you are current Pulse Secure customers, some of you may not be. So Pulse Secure today already secures your data center. So we have a broad endpoint footprint. We support iOS, Android. We supported Windows and Mac for years. We support even the Chrome OS. So we basically we have agents for all of those different platforms. We can interrogate those devices to understand the security posture of those devices. For example, does your laptop have antivirus or DLP installed or what have you? We provide a management layer in the form of Pulse One. A lot of people have known us for role-based access control. That's where we can really, you can construct policies within Pulse Secure that govern who should have access to what, depending on what device they're coming from and other factors. So it's it's a very rich, I would say, rules engine for doing that type of capability. We do provide a mobility management capability as well. The primary reason for that is because it's really foundational to security, particularly with respect to mobile devices. VPN, like I said, we've been known for a long time. Pulse Secure was previously a part of Juniper, and we were their VPN business. Of course, now we're a standalone company, and we are the leader in VPN. So, many customers, I would say probably the majority of the market, uses us for remote access VPN today to provide access to applications and other services that are on-prem. Pulse Secure is also a NAC vendor, so we're a leader in the NAC space. So for employees that are connecting to the enterprise via Wi-Fi or wired, we can secure that as well. So ensuring that only properly secured and managed devices actually connect to your actual network. So this is what we're known for today, is connecting a wide variety of endpoints securely into your data center. But now we're moving into a very new era. So this is a little bit peek of some of the things that we'll be probably talking about at RSA coming up in a couple of weeks. But we've enhanced our platform to address many of the challenges that I talked about previously. So one is that we folded in this notion of cloud, meaning really infrastructure and PaaS services, cloud-based ability to run your current applications, and Saas. We felt that it was important to not only govern access to applications on-prem, but really to cover your entire IT environment. and let you use many of the same controls that you already have in place today that are already in your network. So aside from providing just NAC, which controls access to on-prem, or VPN, which governs access for remote access employees, we also can govern access to cloud resources as well. We've also sort of refined our definition of role-based access control into kind of two categories. One is identity related, and that has to do with identifying individual users and making a determination of what an individual user should have access to. So I'm Kevin, I have an identity within my organization. My IT department has specified what resources I should have access to, and that's really tied to me as a person. The other side of the coin is really around conditional access, and this has to do with kind of the situation that I'm in at a given time. So for example, I may need access to a resource right now from my laptop. So I'm sitting in the office right now doing this webinar. I am using my laptop to do it, and I may need access to various resources. I should be able to access those based on not only my identity as a person, but the security posture of my device. In this case, my device is secured because it's my corporate laptop. An hour from now, however, I may need access to similar resources from my iPhone. And in the case of my iPhone, how do I ensure that the iPhone itself is good? So is the iPhone managed by Pulse Secure? Is the VPN client running on my iOS device? So these things that are really device and situational awareness have more to do with conditional access, and then there's policies related to conditional access as well. So basically, we've taken our core platform that's been built up over many years and is a very robust and widely deployed platform, and essentially extended that to support additional use cases, including cloud. We still support all of the endpoints that we talked about before, and of course that list will keep growing as customers need. But really the newness here is that we not only secure the traditional data center, but we've opened up our platform to really support a hybrid IT environment, which includes traditional data center resources as well as cloud resources. Pulse Secure provides an integrated product portfolio for secure access. So we don't just offer individual products. Certainly you can buy the products individually if you need to solve a particular use case, but I think the better way to think about your vendor, generally speaking, is in how do all those products work together to solve a larger problem. And Pulse Secure, as I mentioned, has moved away from being a remote access vendor to really a much broader secure access vendor. And we have a lot of products and technologies at our disposal to go out and solve those. So those include Pulse Connect Secure, which is really focused on data center access. So NAC, for example, network access control for employees who are in the office and connecting via Wi-Fi or LAN. That's Pulse Policy Secure. Pulse Connect Secure is related to remote access. So again, that's really VPN. Think VPN there when you're trying to connect in remotely to corporate data center resources. Pulse Workspace, which is our mobility management capability, which again, as I said before, is a foundational layer to securing mobile devices that need to connect into these services. And finally, we wrap all that with Pulse One, which is our centralized visibility and management service that really kind of gives you the view into all of those areas. It allows you to manage your remote access appliances. It allows you to manage your NAC appliances. It allows you to manage mobile devices themselves. So it's one integrated story, integrated product portfolio, which is really meant to address secure access in a much broader way versus just being, I would say, remote access. So that pretty much concludes my presentation. Here is some information. Again, we're very focused on secure access. We're very much focused on a lot of the newer use cases, enabling those, as well as the traditional use cases that we've always solved. If you're interested in learning more about anything that I talked about, including seeing it, I suggest you schedule a demo and ask us to focus on your particular use case. I tend to be very use case driven, and I think demos should be kind of in that vein. So if you're, for example, if right now you're dealing with an Office 365 migration, you should talk to us about that, right, and have us demo that type of capability to you and see how we can help alleviate the security problems there. Our email is info@paulsecure.net, and of course you can just go to our website at the Contact Us page, and you can find phone numbers for various geographies. The U.S., we're a global company, so we're in the U.S., we're in Europe and Middle East, we're in Asia Pacific, and you'll find all of the contact information there. So with that, I think I'll open it up now to the Q&A, and I'll switch over to the questions panel.
All right, fantastic. Let's see. We've got quite a few questions here. We'll get all those, or as many as we can, answered. But if you still have a question, make sure you get it in, and we'll either get it answered live or somebody will be able to follow up with you. Let's see. Our first question is from Tim. What would you say is the greatest advantage of PulseSecure's solution over firewall VPN gateways, such as using AnyConnect to leverage the connection to a cloud service?
Yeah, so that's a very good question, and there's actually two parts to this. One, I would say, a lot of firewall vendors usually will include some sort of VPN capability into their firewall. What we found, though, with many of our customers, so basically all of our customers, to be honest with you, have a firewall capability from one of the major vendors, of course, but they also use us for VPN for remote access. And the reason really boils down to scale and supportability. Typically, your firewall vendor is not focused very well on remote access. And when you bolt that into your VPN type capability, it tends to bog down, when you bolt their VPN into their firewall capability, many customers often find that it really bogs down the throughput of their firewall, the policies that they can construct around VPN access. So, for example, the things I mentioned around identity and conditional access, those tend to be very weak. So generally speaking, firewall vendors are very good, the good ones at least, are very good at providing a traditional firewall type of capability or even next-gen firewall type of capability, but are really not focused on remote access at all. So they fall down on the scaling side. Now, the second part of your connection relates to a cloud service, and this is where it gets very interesting. So when you're connecting to cloud services, I think there's really two ways you can do it if you want to secure that channel. One is you can route all of the traffic from a remote device through your data center and then back out to the cloud service. And I think that should be one option, and we would support such an option. So, for example, I could configure Salesforce to only accept traffic from a certain IP address range, and then this would give me the ability to do that kind of routing. But actually, Pulse offers a much more sophisticated view of that. Many times what you really are trying to do is not control the connectivity channel. You're really just trying to control access. And you want to make sure only authorized users using secured and managed devices connect to the Saas service. That's really the point, not so much the traffic throughput. So you could also configure PulseSecure to essentially govern the authorization decision and govern the connection, the initial authorization connection to a Saas service without actually having to route traffic through your network. And that's something that if you're interested in, we should talk more about because that's a fairly deep subject. But we provide that type of flexibility, and you may even want that to be different on an app-by-app basis. These are simply capabilities not provided by sort of the lower grade VPNs offered by firewall vendors.
All right, fantastic. Benjamin would like to know, is there an audit system that you guys go through comparable to our financial institutions audit process? Before we make changes to our VPN policy, it has to go through an audit process.
I'm not sure I quite get the first part of the question in terms of do we go through an audit system. Our VPN appliances and our software is run in very high assurance environments, including financial services like banks, including governments around the world. So, we have a lot of, I would say, accreditations around the world in terms of our capability itself. Now, with respect to making changes to your VPN policy, it has to go through an audit process. That makes complete sense. You probably actually get audited on both sides. One is the configuration that you propose to make should be audited. And then once you've actually made that change, your configurations could be audited themselves, maybe on an annual basis. I mentioned Pulse One before, which will provide centralized management and visibility around our VPNs, as well as other things like our NAC capability. I think that will help ease some of the auditing burden, because once you basically constructed a configuration, you could do that in Pulse One. So you could construct the configuration in one place and have that propagate out to the various VPN devices. So I think it makes the upfront auditing easier. I also think it makes auditing downstream, again, if you're subject to an annual audit, a lot easier as well, because you could just pull up the configuration of a given device and then go through the audit.
All right, fantastic. Let's see. Larry would like to know if you are compliant or certified to Federal Information Process Standards.
Yes, we are. So you're talking about FIPS, basically. So I know we support FIPS. Like I said, we operate in the DoD, for example, and that's a requirement in that environment. I believe we also support common criteria, but I'll not make a strong statement about that. But you should contact us, and we can give you more information on our compliance certifications.
Fantastic. Is Pulse Secure PCI compliant?
There again, I would point you to our contact page, and then we can get you the information with respect to our certification. PCI itself is a little bit. It depends on what you mean by that, right? So Pulse Secure itself doesn't store any of that type of data, but if you're using in that type of environment, then you probably want to look at our certifications to see where it might actually be applicable. So I think PCI is actually a little bit more of a nuanced question than FIPS was.
Great. Let's see. Where do you land on the spectrum of security versus usability? Adjustments in one area will always affect the other.
Yeah, this is a great question, really, because it comes up all the time here at Pulse Secure, especially for the last year and a half. Of course, we're a security company, right? We have secure in our name, but we're very, very focused on usability, both from the end user perspective, which we think is really critical, because if you make the security experience or if security impairs the user experience for using devices and applications, then I think it really just drives up IT costs in the form of support calls and other things. And then also we're focused on usability from the IT administrator's perspective. So we've done a lot of work, particularly over the last year, to improve our consoles, to improve our configurations and make those simpler. We launched Pulse One, which is our management platform, which is quite beautiful and much easier to use, I think, than the traditional ways of configuring these types of devices. And we just think that makes it easier for IT to use the service and to provision these types of services. So I think there's always a balance to be had between security and usability, but you should rest assured that this is something we're very focused on. So in other words, we're not like your typical security company and where end user and IT usability is really an afterthought. I think we're really working very hard to bake those into our system. In fact, we even have our own UX designers and usability team on staff here at headquarters here in San Jose. So usability is very important for us along with security.
Great. So we've got a few more questions, so guys, make sure you get your questions in, and we will get those asked live. So let's see. Our next question is, Tim would like to know, is the mobile client Windows Phone 8 compatible?
That is a good question. I think I'm going to have to refer you to our Contact Us The one thing I would say about the Windows support, there's really kind of two parts to it. One is our VPN client for mobile devices. So I think you want to kind of ask a question about that if that's what you're interested in. And then another question could be around the mobility management support. So if you're interested in that, you should pose your question in that way. So in there, I would refer you to our Contact Us page.
Great. Let's see. How do the Juniper users upgrade to the latest Pulse Secure products?
Oh, this is another great question. So we have, and probably many of you on the call are Juniper customers and may have bought the VPN through Juniper before. Right now, we're offering promotions. Actually, we have a lot of activity kind of around this right now. We're offering promotions to help our customers upgrade. So we've rolled out recently a new hardware platform called the PSA, Pulse Secure Appliance Platform, which is enhanced in a number of ways versus the older MAGs or things that may be in your environment. We also have a new software platform, a new rev of software that is the companion to that hardware platform. If you go to our website, again, and contact us, we can give you all the details on that because that alone is a full presentation. In fact, I did a presentation on that for some customers in the Southwest recently, and we had a lot of interest in that, where they basically have older hardware or software from us. Their renewals they're coming up for renewal, and they want to understand what to do. And I strongly encourage you to check out the new platforms because just the throughput and the software capabilities on the new platforms is just so much higher, and is what's really going to allow us to support these new mobile and cloud use cases.
Great. Let's see. What are the challenges posed by hybrid IT?
Yeah, so this is an interesting question, and I would say they're numerous. We talked about some of the challenges before, where you have a lot of services and applications and other things that have been running your traditional data center. I think you understand those pretty well. For example, there was a question about firewalls. You know where firewalls fit into that story. I think as you move to a hybrid IT environment and you start to adopt SaaS applications and cloud infrastructure and the rest of it, what happens in that mode? What is your firewall, for example, useful in that particular case? In short, how does your security apparatus fit to that new environment? So I think from our perspective, just having the security focus, I think that's really one of the big challenges. I think another big challenge beyond security is management, like I said. Your IT organizations will have a variety of means, software packages, et cetera, to manage your infrastructure. How do you manage all of the cloud capabilities as well? Again, here's where you kind of get into siloed environments. You may have, whatever you're using on-prem. It might be a Tivoli or an EPO or something like that to manage your on-prem equipment. And then now you're trying to roll in SaaS services or cloud services, and there you may be looking at other options to manage those types of services, and now you split up the management across consoles and different vendors. I think this is another really big challenge. Some of this is rhetorical right now because I think there are numerous challenges to deal with, and I think it's certainly not all sorted out. Pulse Secure is addressing a big part of it and focusing on the secure access challenges related to that, but I think there are a number of them in terms of moving to a hybrid IT environment. The one thing I will say, though, just to be clear, I think for many of you, it's best to kind of start to get up to speed with what hybrid IT means with mobility and cloud if you're not already. Because I don't think it's one of those things where IT is going to be able to push back on these things for too long. There are just too many compelling business reasons to want to move to these types of services. The way that you pay for and consume those services is moved to an operational expenditure basis versus capital expenditures. So right there you have the CFO kind of getting involved in these discussions. There are new capabilities that are just being rolled out very fast for SaaS services. So the pace of innovation, I think, in SaaS and cloud is much higher than what you're seeing with kind of your traditional on-prem vendors. The constant updates from those SaaS providers, it's both good and bad, actually. It can have downsides as well. So I think that it would be in all of your interest, just personally, to be prepared for this type of environment.
All right, great. Let's see. How does the Pulse Secure product offering address secure access needs for enterprise?
Yeah, so we talked about some of that already. We have a long history in secure access for enterprises. Again, we've probably 10 or so years have provided secure access for remote employees back into the data center. We also have a very robust NAC product which addresses secure access for employees that are in the office or devices, and this is not just laptops, but laptops, mobile devices, IoT types of devices, et cetera, that are connected to the LAN via Wi-Fi or wired. So we have a long history there. The ways that we address it for cloud and mobile moving forward are very interesting, and this is an exciting time and area for the company. And again, I think you should look at some of the stuff that we put out already. We will be consider scheduling a demo for some of the cloud services where we can go into some of the technical details around how we actually manage that. And I think you'll find it compelling because, especially if you're already a Pulse Secure customer, you get to use a lot of the tools that you're already familiar with and that are already in your infrastructure today and that are already trusted by the biggest and most secure organizations in the world to basically manage these types of services versus saying going with a new vendor or a startup, for example, who may not be here next year. So I think we have a wide variety of tools in our toolkit to address secure access, and that is our focus, secure access. We are very purely focused on that as a company.
All right, fantastic. So we are all out of questions, Kevin, but thank you so much for that awesome presentation. Do you have any final words for our audience?
Yes, we put together a lot of materials around what I've discussed today that go into kind of more depth. We have white papers that have recently been published on this, so look for those coming to your inbox, or again, go to our website and sign up, and you can get that kind of information. We try to include a lot of technical depth, and we try to discuss the overall topic to also educate you generally, in terms of what's going on in the market, even beyond Pulse Secure. So I would say look for that white paper. And, of course, RSA is coming up, so for any of you who are going to be at the conference, you should definitely stop by the Pulse Secure booth, and we're going to have booth staff there. I'll be at the booth occasionally, and it would be great to meet with you and see if you're interested in, if you're dealing with any of these things, cloud and mobility. Again, that's my focus area, so I'm always happy to talk about it.
All right, fantastic. Thank you so much for that awesome presentation. I do want to remind everyone, if your question wasn't addressed live, somebody with Pulse Secure will be able to follow up with you. And if you had to step out or miss any part of today's presentation, you will be receiving an email in a few days with a link to view the webinar on demand. As a reminder, Justin and Liz with the On the Air show will also be at RSA, so if you want to get on that show, reach out to Justin in the community. Special thanks to Pulse Secure for creating today's content and sponsoring this great event, and thanks to each and every one of you for tuning in today. We hope to see you back soon for another Spiceworks Partner webinar. But until then, stay safe and keep it spicy.